Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Hey folks, welcome back to Financial Issues. Wonderful to be here with you all this morning. I'm Seth Udinsky along with Sam Case and our Studio A team from our Philadelphia headquarters here. Grateful to be with you on the show today. Hey, if you're with us today, please say hello. You can let us know via our many outlets that we watch.
Oh,
Sam's
not
here.
to me. Not
hello.
to me.
No, Sam,
okay.
You can say it. Sam's here, and I'm here. And all of you as well. Hello to each of you. Great to be here with you. If you're on the website, financialissues.org/live, say hello there. Be sure to do that. Facebook, Twitter. Streaming live now on Twitter. We love to see that. Twitter following also. Rumble and YouTube. Good to be here with you all. Hey, on today's show, the plot is thickening in the backlash surrounding Target. Now, this is a story, Sam. We've been following this story pretty consistently since way back in like 2022 when we first saw those tuck-friendly bathing suits come out, and then Target kind of backtracked all that. It's been kind of a back and forth.
They've been the punching bag ever since.
Kind of from both sides.
The left and the right.
Kind of from both sides, yeah. Well, apparently, Sam, there's a new player. There's a new force at play concerning this most recent backlash from the left at the Minneapolis-based retailer, and it's pretty odd. Also, Walmart's switching to another major retailer, also in some hot water, but for different reasons and from a different base. Walmart's in hot water from its conservative base, thanks to a family connection, making some somewhat controversial marketing schemes. We'll touch on that as well in a moment. We'll also hear some great timeless wisdom from our host, Shana. I'm really looking forward to hearing that. Folks, it's great to be here with you today. Thanks for joining us one more time. Sam, let's get it started here by switching to Target. So this backlash, the latest backlash that we've received, apparently is coming from fake online accounts. I love this. This is so funny. What can you tell us about this?
It's the old adage, right, Seth? You can't always believe what you read on the internet because it's just not true. According to new data, it shows left-wing backlash over Target's decision to end DEI was driven, at least in part, by fake social media accounts. This is according to analysis conducted by an Israeli cyber firm. They found that nearly 30%, so about a third, of online pushback came from fraudulent accounts. They said, quote, "What looks like public consensus online is often fake, manufactured by inauthentic accounts, shaping perceptions and driving artificial outrage. Companies are making multi-million-dollar decisions based on data generated by robots. They're betting shareholder value on signals that just aren't real." Now, of course, Seth, we've talked about this on the show. At least some of the pushback has been real. That includes a 40-day boycott back in March, led by the far left activist Reverend Jamal Bryant.
So a couple things right off the bat here, Sam. First of all, we're seeing robots doing all this stuff. Folks, listen, watch every 80s superhero movie. The robots turn evil. I promise you they do. They're going to turn evil, okay?
I mean, Marvel, Vision's okay.
That's true.
He's
Vision
a good robot.
Okay. He is okay. Yeah, but Ultron's not. Anyway, we're going down our Marvel lore there. Crazy stuff. No, but Sam, what is really fascinating about this, I think, is that someone is behind this. It is someone. You know, whether it's, I wonder.
That's right. It's not just robots acting out of their own will. They don't have a will. There's someone behind them.
There's someone who created this. There's someone who set the systems in place. I wonder if maybe it is Jamal Bryant, because contrary to his title, he is not a reverend. He is not worthy of the title.
Jamal just has thousands of Anon accounts.
That's right.
On Twitter,
I wonder if he's got all the Anon accounts. If that's his ministry, if that's what he's doing. But, it could be, who is it? Google? I mean, could it be some kind of big tech conspiracy, a coalition of nerds hiding out in the basement of their high school who figure this stuff out? Like, who knows? We don't know. But fascinating stuff nonetheless. That's what I want to know, Sam, is who in the world is behind this?
You have no idea, right? It can even be foreign actors. I'm not saying Russia, but you do know that our enemies do love to see political turmoil in the United States. Totally. So that's always an option as well.
Totally. We do know someone is behind this, Sam, for sure. Some incel conspiracy. But the thing we have to remember as well is we've seen stuff like this before, and it's been recent. You know, it wasn't that long ago in 2020 to 2024 when you literally could not talk about anything negative having to do with a COVID vaccine on YouTube, or you would get banned. You could not talk about that stuff on Facebook, or you would get banned. This stuff happens.
You couldn't even post a video of Donald Trump, or you'd get banned. It actually happened to us.
It's crazy, crazy stuff. That's right. It was FI Some News. We got slashed from, was it YouTube, I think?
For CPAC, yep.
Yeah, unbelievable stuff. So this type of stuff happens, folks. Don't be surprised when the internet can be used for really dangerous things like this. Now, I say all of that, shadow banning, less than savory things, all of that, also couching it with the fact that Target earned this. Okay, Target made the mistakes. They made the bed that they're laying in.
Put themselves in the target.
That's exactly right. That's well said. They certainly did. They were doing some really bad things between 2016 and 2023, and now they've changed course a little bit, and that's a good thing. And some people have decided it's okay to go back and shop there, but nonetheless, this is all a result of that, folks. It really is. The backlash and bans that we're seeing from the left, now seeing that it's drummed up by robots, apparently, just really crazy stuff. But again, Target did this to themselves. This is not a feel bad for Target session, absolutely not. But it is interesting to see. And I think really a good lesson for us as we use technology, we use AI, different things like that, to just remember to use it carefully for sure, because it can be used for pretty crazy stuff. Sam, let's jump gears now to a different retailer, kind of a competitor of Target, Walmart, also facing boycotts from the other side over a strange family connection and what that person did. What can you tell us?
This is a kind of odd story, Seth. Walmart is facing backlash from Trump supporters after heiress Christy Walton paid for an anti-Trump ad in the New York Times. This was part of that No Kings campaign over the weekend. Some conservatives, especially on Twitter, are now calling for boycotts against the company. Christy Walton, it should be noted, she's not actually connected to the company in any way besides from marriage. She married one of Sam Walton's sons a few years ago. He's since died, but she still retains a sizable stake in the company, about 2%. But besides that, she's not connected in any other way. In fact, Walmart had to release a statement. They said, quote, "The advertisements from Christy Walton are in no way connected to or endorsed by Walmart. She does not serve on the board or play any role in decision-making at the company."
So, Sam, I got to tell you, when I see a statement like that from a spokesperson, it feels like saving face. It feels like doing cleanup duty, and it makes me distrust Walmart in this.
Listen, I completely understand that, but I'm going to side with Walmart here. I just don't think they'd be stupid enough to really step in it, especially in light of all the, DEI blowback. Right. And they've been trying to cozy up to Donald Trump in light of all the tariffs. They want to get on his good side so they can get a good deal on that stuff. So I just really think this is Christy Walton acting on her own. She has a history of doing left-wing donations to things. So I really think this is just her, and it has nothing to do with the company.
Definitely. Nonetheless, not a good look for Walmart for sure, especially as you just said, Sam. They just got done cleaning up their act. They're trying to get this cleaned up, and now you have this. This could undercut it, at least from a public image perspective.
So I could imagine there's a phone call going on behind the scenes saying, "Hey, Christy, what are you doing?"
Yeah, what's going on here? But does this necessitate a boycott? That's really the big question. I'm not so sure it does.
Yeah, I really don't.
So sure it does.
Just my opinion, I don't think so. I mean, let me put it this way. If you think the boycotts against Tesla by the left were silly, because, what does Elon's personal politics have to do with the company? If you thought that was silly, I think you should think this is silly too.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it would not necessitate a boycott. I do think boycotts can work. I think we've seen them work before, but they have to be targeted, and they have to be for a good reason too. They really have to be for a good reason. If you can't get behind a really good cause, of course I disagree with what this person did, but it has to pack a little bit more punch than that. Folks, and this is really kind of a good reminder for us to just point out, the difference between stewarding your money away from wicked companies and doing business with companies, whether they engage in wicked things or not. I have no problem with someone shopping at Walmart or shopping at Target, even after all this stuff, simply because it is not a stewardship issue. That is a transactional issue where you give money to the company, they give you something in return, an equal value for the money that you gave, although that value can be debated based on inflation and different things like that. But nonetheless, you then become a steward of that thing that you own. That is now what you are in stewardship possession over. In an investment relationship, you retain stewardship possession over your money. And so we would say absolutely never, do not invest in companies like Walmart, like Target, that are involved in the LGBTQ nonsense, for example, or they fund abortions, for example. which Walmart does, by the way.
I'd also say, Seth, it's also not a BRI issue what the personal people do who are involved in the company. There could be people on our buy list that the CEOs or members of the board might support something that's an ungodly agenda, but the company itself doesn't. CEOs are kind of nasty people, and they do all kinds of things. We can't let their personal lives impact how we make our investment decisions. It's all up to what the companies actually do with your money, not the people who run the companies and what their opinions about this and that are.
Exactly. Hopefully that can be encouraging to you folks. I mean, biblically responsible investing and good stewardship, it leaves room for your conscience to be a good guide. You follow the word of God first, and then you let your conscience be your guide with matters like this. I think that's a really good thing to consider. Folks, we'll be hearing from Shana coming up next year. I'm excited for that. In the meantime, we got more financial issues coming up right after this commercial break. You're going to want to stick with us. We'll be right back after this.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
Through Crossroads Kids Club, lives like Dali's are being changed all over the world.
When I was 8 years old, my parents separated temporarily. It made me feel lost, empty, and without direction. Until one day, I went with my cousins to the Crossroads Club. This led me to know Lord Jesus and accept Him in my heart. He changed my life, and I don't feel lonely anymore.
Reaching kids with the hope of the gospel in schools and across the world. You can change a young life today at reachourschools.com.
Preborn is making motherhood possible for thousands of moms across America.
I found out that I was pregnant. My family, they were like, no, you're not having this baby. I met Miss Linda. She offered to get me an ultrasound. That's where I very first heard the heartbeat. It was really a great thing that I was led to the choice to keep on.
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of Preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
Listening to this best of financial issues.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shana are hers alone and are for informational purposes only and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Welcome back to Financial Issues. Thanks for sticking with us here. Well, you just heard us talk about numbering our days and how that helps us to create a heart of wisdom, and being wise in financial matters means that we plan for certain things. And a couple of weeks ago, we discussed estate planning as a stewardship issue. If you missed that and you want to go back on podcast and find it, or in our archives, that was May the 27th. So that's a great follow-up to this video, or a precursor to this video, actually. So I said in the beginning of the estate planning that the beginning of estate planning starts with this question: Lord, what do you want me to do with your stuff when I don't need it anymore? So, it starts with the acknowledgement that everything belongs to the Lord, and once we come to acceptance on that fact, then it's good wisdom to ask the Lord what He wants us to do with it when we don't need it anymore. So I asked you to, or I encourage you to ask yourself whether all of your beneficiaries were people heirs or whether you had any kingdom heirs, and whether you needed to consider any adjustments. So we also discussed the differences between probate and non-probate assets and explored the cheap and easy ways of passing those assets using beneficiary designations. Today, I have my friend and colleague Jason MacDowell back, and we're going to go on to the next steps beyond naming beneficiaries. So not everything can be passed by naming beneficiaries. One example is your minor children. At some point, you probably have accumulated enough stuff to need some type of legal documents to make sure that everything happens the way that you intend for it to happen. So, Jason, let's look at the two most common legal documents used for passing assets. Talk about a trust and a will.
Yeah, so in general, when speaking to people, whether they're clients or not, the questions always pop up about if a trust is wise to have regarding estate planning. And the answer is always going to be specific to what the individual wants for their estate plan, or better said, well, it depends. So we need details. Most suitable situations are everything to my surviving spouse and then to my kids and kingdom. I think that's a simple way to explain what your best wishes are. But before speaking on trust, let's actually start with the will, or define a will and a trust. So a will, or last will and testament, is a legal document that outlines how a person wishes their assets to be distributed after their death. It also specifies who should care for any minor children. It names a personal representative or an executor to manage the estate. Essentially, it's a formal declaration of a person's final wishes regarding their property and dependents. So additionally, a will dictates to probate court how assets are to be distributed, so it involves the probate process. The probate process is a key point we'll talk about here a little bit more. So with a trust is a legal arrangement where ownership of assets is transferred to a third party. That's known as a trustee, who manages and controls those assets for the benefit of another party, the beneficiary. The person who creates the trust and transfers the property is often called the grantor or the settlor. Trusts do cost more, though, so there is an additional cost to that, be put together by an attorney. And then trust is a non-probate entity, meaning it bypasses the probate process. So that's important in the estate plan.
Yep. So to reiterate, a will is that legal document. It tells the court how you want your stuff distributed. And I say yours tongue in cheek because we know it's all God's. And it names the person who is given the authority to do so, to sign, bills of sale or whatever has to happen to settle the estate. So I like to think of a trust as an entity that is created to manage and pass assets to future managers. So that a trust creates a fiduciary arrangement of trust, where the trustee holds and manages assets for the benefit of the beneficiaries according to the terms set by the grantor, as Jason just mentioned. So, Jason, talk a little bit, having a will, we said a trust bypasses the probate process, but a will actually creates a probate process. The probate process is where the legal document, the will, is taken to court and, the estate is settled. So talk about that for a minute.
Definitely. So the probate process, as you mentioned, differs for a will as it dictates to the probate court what to do. So that legal document tells probate process with probate courts what to do. So there's a little bit an extra mechanic there. While trust language will dictate distributions as it is a non-probate entity. So the mechanic is of having to go through probate process isn't there. It's just basically, hey, what's the trust actually say? So that begs the question, why have a will and a trust? Well, a will would cover any assets that may be probatable, like real estate, vehicles, if no beneficiary designation, land, or other property that could be involved. In some states, though, and this is important, a will is actually required even if individuals have a trust established to handle the distribution of assets. And many other important reasons to have. It would be wise to speak with a legal advisor or attorney on your individual needs specific to your state that you reside in. So your primary residential state.
Yeah. So property and vehicles can be put into a trust to be managed for the benefit of the beneficiaries. And having a pour over will at a minimum can address anything that was not put into the trust, because once you create a trust, then you have to put things into the trust. And the pour-over will can address those things that were not actually retitled into the name of the trust, but goes to the beneficiaries in the same percentages. So a trust is narrow in that it only controls the things that are placed in it, while a will is broader and it addresses the entire estate minus what is placed in the trust or in those non-probate types of accounts that pass by beneficiary designation. So wills also typically address, like as you mentioned, the custody and care of minor children, and sometimes even instructions for funeral arrangements. So let's talk about the types of trust. Go ahead.
There's many types of trusts. We're just going to cover just a few here, at least for this segment. So let's start with the revocable trust, or also known as a living trust. So these trusts can be modified or terminated by the grantor during their lifetime. Modifications would be adding and removing assets placed in the trust. It's sort of a discretion thing you can add or remove. So this provides the most flexibility. The next one, of course, is the irrevocable trust. These trusts are generally finalized upon creation and cannot be altered or terminated by the grantor, also meaning assets cannot be removed. So the purpose may include reducing estate taxes and protecting assets from creditors. So there's a purpose to those two specifics there.
Yep. Another use could also be that these types of trusts are great planning tools for blended families. So if you have a blended family, maybe it was early when your kids were little, or maybe it was after your kids were grown and you had a death of a spouse and you got remarried and you share 0 kids in common, but maybe you're blessed with a lot of them. So if you have a blended family and don't do estate planning, listen to this: the last spouse to die controls the distribution of the assets. Let that sink in. I'm going to say it again. The last spouse to die controls the ultimate distribution of assets, because what happens is that many people want to take care of their spouse, and that's an honorable thing, so they make their spouse the primary beneficiary. But then whenever the first spouse dies and the spouse inherits and gets the use of all of the assets, they rename beneficiaries. So unless there was some irrevocable planning that was done ahead of time, then the surviving spouse gets to dictate and change the entire estate plan if they want to. And if you've never had conversations, you may not be honoring the wishes of your deceased spouse because maybe you don't even know them. And in my opinion, and maybe this is a good time to insert it or not, but if you have a second marriage and you have minor kids, the kids really should come first. So the waters get muddier once the children are grown, but my advice is that you need to spend time with the Lord to get the answers for your own specific situation and have those very, very hard conversations with your spouse. Keep going. Jason.
All right. No, those are great points. Let's talk about the minor children and where the will comes in here. So there's another type of trust called a testamentary trust, and this is a trust established by a will. So essentially, hopefully you're paying a little bit less to get the will package at your attorney, and a will becomes effective upon the grantor's death. So a point to be made that with a testamentary trust or a trust created by a will are subject to the probate process still. But a good example is the need for creation due to minors. A will creates a trust for the benefit of minors where distribution of assets can be done at a later age specified in the legal language or the legal documents. So that's essentially a case of you have minor children and the trust will essentially be handled until maybe the minor children are no longer minors or they want to use it for a specific purpose. It's really up to your best wishes in that case. So pretty much hopefully any attorney that's giving any legal advice and you have minor children, this hopefully is included in that discussion of what their best thoughts are. So the last one we'll talk about here are charitable trusts. There's many of these. These trusts trusts are established to benefit charitable organizations, either through direct donations or through a trust that provides income to a charity, then passes on remaining assets to non-charitable beneficiaries. That also can be flip-flop with different types of charitable trusts, like a charitable remainder trust are another common type of charitable trust that's used in advanced estate and tax planning. So that's a little bit more advanced, and maybe someday we'll talk about it.
Yeah, so, I'm sure we will. I think most people think that they are almost done with the process once they just finally get the appointment with the attorney. But in most cases, though, that is just the beginning. So what we encourage you to do is to think about these things before you even meet with a legal professional. Have your game plan. Know generally where you want your stuff to go and be able to articulate it well. We call that having a blueprint. So being able to just describe in your own words, hey, I want my spouse to have use of the assets for as long as they're alive, and then beyond this is where we want things to go. So with that testamentary trust, sometimes it's a case where you want you know who you want to raise and care on a daily basis for your kids, for your minor kids, but maybe there's a different person that you want to have to be in charge of the money. So it helps you address all of those questions. So once you get to that attorney for the legal advice, make sure, because you're going there to make sure that what you want to happen actually happens, that you have the legal documents to make that done. But don't go in to get advice about what you want to happen. The stuff in question doesn't belong to the attorney, and it's not his stewardship decision. It really doesn't even belong to you or me. It belongs to God, and God should have the final say. If you have to leave us, we wish you a good day. Everyone else, stick around. We'll be back with more financial issues.
In the last 10 to 15 years being in ministry, being married, something that has been constant in our lives is Samaritan Ministries. As we've moved, we've had babies, we've had different things come up, we have just been able to rely on Samaritan in ways that we never really even thought about before becoming members.
Our heart's desire is to plant roots and be in a place for a really long time. It's how we were raised. We see the benefits of that, but we also see the open-handedness of being used by the Lord wherever He calls, because we just assumed when we started pursuing church planting, the quickest way to get from point A to point B is a straight line. And with the Lord, sometimes you find out it looks a lot more like this. And yet, Samaritan was with us through the entire thing.
We didn't have to look into, we have to change insurances now because we've moved states or whatever the case may be. And it's just been a real blessing to us in different phases of life.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Colleen.
And we're the Gen X.
And we're Samaritan members.
My name is David Hunsinger. I live in Edgewater Park, New Jersey. I came across financial issues by accident. I believe it was on a certain TV station at that time. I got interested in finding out more, so I went online to find out more, and that's when I became a more active participant in financial issues. I did have some interest in investing prior to getting involved with FISM. Biblical investing I thought was more important, so obviously I changed my approach. I know I'm much happier for it. I'm probably more at ease now. It's probably the best way to sum it up in terms of I don't necessarily worry about if this is going to happen, if that's going to happen. I don't worry about that. If I was to encourage somebody to participate in FISM, I would use myself as an example. I've been very pleased to participate. If God's happy, I'm happy.
Align your investments with your faith. Become an FISM partner today at financialissues.org.
I want to make a point. No matter what happens, I'll always be there for you.
I know.
listening to this best of Financial Issues. Folks, welcome back to Financial Issues. Happy that you joined us here today and you've made it to the second half of the program. Good to see so many of you on the chat. We'll give a chat shout out a little bit later on right now. Quickly here, the markets just opened up. Let's see what they're looking at right now. Dow Jones is right above the flat line. The S&P is right below and the NASDAQ is right above. So a somewhat rare, calm start for the markets today. We'll see how that continues the rest of the day. Folks, I got a special guest on with me here, as I said in the last segment. Frank Gaffney is joining me here now. Frank is the president of the Institute for the American Future. He also serves as vice chairman of the Committee on the Present Danger China. He's an American patriot. He served under President Ronald Reagan as Reagan's Secretary of Defense for International Security Policy, and it is a pleasure to have him on today. Frank, thanks for joining me on the show, brother.
Oh, it's my delight to be with you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Frank, let's get right to it. You know, the big news dominating the financial news cycle, really these last 72 hours or so, has been the heightened trade tension between the United States and China. We've seen back and forth accusations, whispers of maybe there will be a talk coming soon between Xi and Trump, both sides accusing each other of breaking the tentative trade deal. You're an expert on U.S.-China relations, Frank. Can you tell us what is happening here in your expertise?
To set the stage for this comment in response to your question by saying it's a little known fact, but nonetheless a fact, that the Chinese Communist Party is at war with the United States of America. It explicitly seeks our destruction. So essentially anything that the Chinese are up to, whether it's trade or whether it's fentanyl or whether it's efforts to insinuate People's Liberation Army personnel across our border, or any number of other things, the assaults on our industrial base, you name it, it's about trying to defeat us. So I think what the Chinese are doing with this trade business is, you know, they've been backing and filling. The president put the hammer to them, appropriately, I think, insisting on reciprocity in trade. They initially pronounced that they were going to fight back. It turned out that that had a devastating impact on their factories and their employment situation and political difficulties for the party at home, I think. So they backed and filled. They said, oh, no, we'll have a conversation with Scott Bessent and we'll see what we can do to cool things off for 90 days and we'll, lower the tariffs and so on. But I think what we always see the Chinese doing is trying to find new ways to get advantage and to undermine this country. And so I think the bottom line is the pursuit of negotiated arrangements with the Chinese Communist Party that will be mutually satisfactory in the trade space, that will lead to real reciprocity, or better yet, decoupling, are going to be resisted at every turn by the Chinese because that's not in their interest in terms of taking us down.
And Frank, that really leads to my next question. You know, we've heard news that a trade talk might be happening soon. It's tough for me to imagine a talk like this happening with a party, as you mentioned, the Chinese Communist Party being our mortal enemy. How confident are you that we will see something, whether it's a call between Trump and Xi or something like that, and then maybe a renewed deal of some sorts being made?
Well, it's entirely possible that there will be a call. It hasn't happened yet. In fact, there are rumors that Xi is missing in action. That may or may not be well-founded. I can't tell. But what is pretty clearly the case is that they're interested in stretching this thing out. They, I guess, calculate that Trump will become more tractable, that he'll be more accommodating to their positions if they do. But Seth, again, the bottom line is, let's just say for the purpose of discussion that there's some sort of call and there's some sort of breakthrough and there's some sort of new deal. The Chinese will violate that deal at the first opportunity. That's what they do. And they will use it as simply something that buys them time and enables them to, as I said earlier, translate that into advantage for them and to the detriment of this country. So I'm not sanguine about it happening. But on the other hand, if it does, I'm really not sanguine about it being in our interest.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that then leads to, what would Trump's next move be? And that's where I'd love to get your expertise here, Frank. What does Donald Trump need to do to, number one, keep China in its place, number two, keep American interest in the driver's seat, and number three, and this is the one I'm most concerned about probably, is not provoking China to do something drastic as a result? If you had the presidency here right now, what would be the advice that you would give him as to what his next move should be?
Well, you and I have talked about this on numerous occasions in the past, and I would just reprise it by saying, on the 21st of February of this year, Donald Trump issued a national security presidential memorandum that he entitled the America First Investment Policy. I think it's a spectacularly well done and important policy pronouncement. He basically said to the U.S. government, our policy is not to underwrite our mortal enemy. And what has been happening here for, over a decade, since Joe Biden gave the Chinese preferential access to our capital markets. I don't know if your audience is fully apprised of that unbelievable arrangement, but unique in the world. No American company can avoid following our laws, our security laws, or our regulations. No other company in the world can, but Chinese companies can and have. What I would say to the President of the United States, if I had his ear, is enforce the America First investment policy. Make it clear that unlike this deal with CATL that just went down, CATL, the Chinese battery manufacturer, where two American titans on Wall Street, as you know, Jamie Dimon's JP Morgan and Brian Moynihan's Bank of America, just raised a cool $4.7 billion, if not more, for the world's largest electric battery manufacturer. It happens to be, according to the United States Pentagon, a Chinese military company operating in the United States. It happens to be, according to Marco Rubio and others on the Hill back in last July, a slave labor exploiting company. This is not the kind of company that we ought to be doing business with, nor should we, as the president pointed out in his policy, otherwise helping not just Chinese People's Liberation Army companies like CATL, but also the so-called civil military fusion companies, which is basically every other Chinese company. That's where I would go. And as to whether that would provoke the Chinese or not, I don't know. But I think it is high time that, especially if the Chinese seem poised to go into a shooting war phase, especially if, God forbid, they take over South Korea, which is a possibility as we speak, we will rue the day that we've put any more money into those companies. And by the way, I would say to your audience, Seth, if you have money in China, and you may not know that you do, ask the people managing your funds. Make sure you don't. But if you do, get it out of there right quick. Yeah. That's the message that I would send, and I think it would give Donald Trump enormous leverage on the Chinese Communist Party at a time he needs it.
Frank, that is well said, brother, and I so appreciate your expertise there. Moving quickly here, you had mentioned, the possibility of China attacking South Korea. Of course, the other possibility is that they might attack Taiwan. In fact, Pete Hegseth shared some thoughts in line with that very concern. What are your thoughts there? Is this really an imminent possibility that China could strike that island nation just south, of it?
Well, just to clarify, in South Korea, I'm not suggesting they're about to attack South Korea. I'm talking about them taking it over through the ballot box, not through bullets. That may well be what we find in the next few hours. I hope not. Please God, no. But as to Taiwan, Seth, what I think Pete was absolutely dead on about is that the Chinese and Admiral Sam Paparo, the commander of our Indo-Pac Command, has also said this. What we're watching the Chinese doing now vis-a-vis Taiwan is not just exercising military forces. They are rehearsing to use them against Taiwan. Now, as you know, a dress rehearsal can turn into, an actual performance without notice. And I think that's a distinct possibility. Pete said it could be imminent. And I think he's right. And therefore, everything we are doing now ought to be aimed at deterring the Chinese from even contemplating that. And I think working with the people of China wherever we can to help bring down the regime that is terribly repressing them and has for 70 odd years, and is threatening us, as well as Taiwan, of course, and others.
Frank, we appreciate your expertise so much, brother. Hey, quickly, how can our audience learn more? How can they stay up to date with what you're doing, the work that you're doing to fight for our freedoms on an international level?
Well, thank you for asking. We have 5 coalitions that we sponsor at the Institute for American Future. One that's very much relevant to this is presentdangerchina.org. The Committee on the Present Danger China. I commend it to you as a great resource.
Absolutely. Folks, that's Frank Gaffney. Frank, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for the work that you have done for our country and continue to do, brother. It's always a pleasure to have you on, and I look forward to our next conversation, Frank. Thank you. Folks, that is Frank Gaffney with me today. Just a wonderful reminder that we need to be praying for our country, praying for God's hand of protection over it, praying for our president right now and for our political leaders also as they seek the well-being of our country. More financial issues coming around the corner right after this break. We'll be back.
It's up to us to stand up and say, you know, enough is enough. All of this unbiblical stuff that's going on, whether it's abortion or transsexual or LGBTQ, widespread pornography, human trafficking. Bottom line, it's still up to us. If we stop investing in these corporations that are trying to destroy us, sooner or later they're going to wake up.
To learn more about biblically responsible mutual funds and ETFs, go to timothyplan.com.
I found out I was pregnant when I was 21 years old. For me, I was scared, I was shaking. They do an ultrasound, and that's when everything changed. When I saw my baby and when I heard her heartbeat, that was it. We've seen the hand of God ever since we stepped into the pregnancy center.
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of Preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
From the time Crossroads began back in 1998, our sole focus was on reaching children in public schools in the United States. And then in 2017, we decided to translate our curriculum into Spanish, primarily so that we could serve Spanish-speaking churches and students in the U.S. And as I was connecting with a pastor in Chicago and telling him about the materials that Crossroads had in Spanish and about what Kids Club was all about, he said, "Hey, I have a friend in Mexico who I think would really benefit from these materials and your approach to working with children." And so I began the conversation with Rolando Gonzalez. March of 2018, I traveled for the first time to Guadalajara and met with Rolando, and right away we just connected on a heart level. And so we sent a team in August of 2018 to train leaders here in Mexico, and the first international kids clubs were born.
Reaching kids with the hope of the gospel in schools and across the world. You can change a young life today at reachourschools.com. This best of financial issues.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Hey, welcome back to Financial Issues, folks. Good to be here with you today. It's been a busy show. The chat is lively. So we'll get to some of these comments here. I asked the question, is it enough to do BRI or do we need to be doing more? And so many of you gave some great answers here. Stephen from Oklahoma saying, Seth, thank you for sharing your heart on BRI. It's so tempting to stray and want to dabble in non-BRI while searching for income stocks. Stephen, you're very welcome. And I really do appreciate that. It really is a conviction of the heart. Sam and I were talking during that break. It really is. We genuinely want to be able to provide an investment strategy for you. And as we were talking in that break, with the work that Stefan and his team do, there's a certain level of it where you kind of do have to give up your goal of investing to make a profit.
It's not really an investing strategy. It's an activist strategy.
It's actually an activist strategy. It's more you're investing to try to change something. And so maybe if you're considering doing that, it might be a better idea for those of us who have a little bit more when it comes to net worth, a little bit more ability ability to invest a little bit more to be able to make an impact. You know,
I kind of view it as maybe Stefan would disagree with me, but I kind of view it as more of a wealthy man's game, so that you have more to leverage in these companies as opposed to your average investor who you're just trying to grow your wealth. So, and you also have to know yourself. Are you someone, and I have a feeling most people aren't like this, are you someone who wants to read all of the reports coming out for the shareholder meetings and actively be involved in those conversations? I have a feeling most people aren't like that. They just want to dump their money, see if it's doing well, buy, sell, hold, all that stuff. They don't want to be involved in the intricacies of the individual companies. If that is you, though, if you are some sort of policy wonk who cares about that, you have money to leverage. I don't know, maybe that would be something that you'd want to look at what Stefan's doing. That's just not most people.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. Let's see, Dave and Darlene, good to see you guys. Lisa here as well. Brian from Missouri, good to see you there, brother. Claude, good to see you, my man. Hope the move is going well. I know Claude has been in the middle of a move, so we've been praying for you, brother. Daniel from Tennessee, great to see you, brother. I know we answered your question earlier. Robert from Texas, talking about our founder, Dan Celia, saying he tried to do both, but remember, Dan never slept. And Robert, you're right about that. He certainly, he would wake up very early in the morning to prep for the show and did a lot of that stuff. Nelson from Louisiana saying it takes both approaches, all on your own conscience. Love that. Robert from Texas saying y'all have enough on your plate. Stick with BRI. Robert, you got it, man. That's actually part of why we want to uplift groups like Stefan's group, because we know they can do that stuff. We're focusing on what we do well. Let them focus on what they do well. You know. So I think that's excellent. Let's see. We've got, who else do we have here in the chat? I think I mentioned most of you. Brian from Virginia. I see you, brother. Good to see you there. George from North Carolina. Hello to you, George. I think I mentioned Robert from Texas, but if I didn't, good to see you, brother. And of course, Uncle John from Indianapolis, Indiana. Great to see you, my friend, as always. Welcome to all of you. Andy, I see you there as well from Kansas. Great to see you. And Daniel from Tennessee. I think I already got Daniel, so I apologize for saying your name multiple times. James in South Carolina is here as well. And Debbie from Kentucky, also good to see you as well, Debbie. The Financial Issues family is much appreciated here. Alrighty, folks, let's continue this conversation now, Sam, as we're talking about the DEI stuff. That's been a recurring theme on our show. Corporations are continuing to scrub DEI, but I wonder how serious they are at this.
Big question, right? That's the whole thing we've been talking about. That's what Stefan said in your interview. He said, "Are these guys actually serious?" By the way, I also love that he out and out called DEI what it is. He just said it's racial discrimination.
That was great.
For the sake of this conversation today, I'm still going to be using the term DEI just so we know what we're talking about. But yes, according to recent analysis from Gravity Research, they were reviewing public documents from Fortune 100 companies showing that language connected to diversity, equity, and inclusion has dropped by over 70% this year, with the term DEI in particular dropping by 98%. So you know some sort of impact is happening right there. They're trying to cover themselves a little bit because the blowback is real. Some companies, they're trying to replace these terms with more neutral ones that are still kind of DEI light, things like belonging and, quote, diverse perspectives. But even many of these phrases are fading away. Of companies making changes to their policies, nearly half have outright revised or eliminated hiring diversity goals. So saying we're going to hire, 25% Latinos, 25% white, 25% black. They said we're just not going to do that. And others have also ended racial and gender considerations for executive compensation as well. Meanwhile, outside of the corporate sphere, however, CBS polling shows Americans are still kind of split about whether DEI should actually stay or go.
Fascinating that they're split. I mean, DEI is proven over and over again to just be absolute nonsense. And it is great to see so many of these, really, Sam, what I would call is discriminatory hiring practices go away. It's proven to be harmful for businesses. You need competition. Doesn't matter the skin color. Doesn't matter the gender. If the person is best for the job, they get hired for the job. That should be the thing. Shouldn't matter If you have darker skin tone, lighter skin tone, if you're a male, female, if you are the best qualified for the job, that is going to help the business the most. And I think business leaders are realizing this. Now, if this is true, it is promising. My hope is we see companies get rid of this stuff at the grassroots level. That's where real change is going to happen, because then we can be confident that it's going to be a lot harder for things to return if we see a change in the guard in the next presidential election. That's what I'm keeping my eyes on that, folks.
And when you say grassroots, you mean internally at the company? I'm
talking about internally. Yeah, I'm talking about internally at the company. If you see this stuff going away internally, that's a good sign. Yep. That's a really good sign. Now, the problem, Sam, is this next headline, because there is a question of if DEI is actually going away or if it's just getting rebranded.
Right. So that is the question. Are they keeping it but just calling it something else? I saw this article from a website called HR Grapevine. They said many companies are pivoting toward alternative terminology to maintain diversity-focused programs without actually altering them or attracting political backlash. They give examples of JP Morgan changing their phrasing of equity to opportunity in its initiatives, while companies like Walmart have also adopted phrases like Walmart for everyone. The article also says, while terminology may be changing, experts do suggest that corporate DEI strategies remain largely intact. So that's not the best headline there, but I want to pair that with what else is going on in the companies, because I think it's kind of both ands. Companies are changing their policies in name and still keeping some of their DEI ideas internally, ERG groups, all of those types of things. But there is also real change. For example, according to Robbie Starbuck, who's been the main driver in anti-DEI, he said many companies are making changes. For example, Walmart has outright ended participation with the pro-LGBT Corporate Equality Index. That's something many companies getting rid of DEI have also done as well. Walmart is also scrapping racial training for its employees on top of that. Meanwhile, JP Morgan, another company that was also listed in that article as not really making changes, I don't know, because CEO Jamie Dimon, he says some really harsh things about their DEI programs. He says it's all stupid and a waste of money, which says to me that there's going to be actual real change inside the company.
Yeah. Sam, I sure hope that's the case. I hope Robbie's right. I hope that what we're seeing with, Jamie Dimon having harsh language, hope that's legit. It was fascinating, Sam. We were talking yesterday after the show about how, so many companies who instituted this stuff back in the race riots of 2020 just kind of did it as like, okay, let's just do this. We'll have a little group of people doing this to kind of, basically appease the left wing of our constituency, basically. And then almost those groups formed a hostile takeover, and they became the leaders of these companies.
This is something Robbie Starbuck has talked about quite a bit. He says that they've kind of been held hostage by these guys that they hired just to put out some PR statements to get the far left to leave them alone. Over time, they've kind of taken over the company in this shadowy kind of way. So he says a lot of these companies, when he calls them, he says he's going to do this expose exposing all their DEI stuff. They're actually grateful. They're so happy Robbie Starbuck's giving them an out. Now he can put them on blast, and that gives them a reason to fire all these guys. Yeah. They never really had one before.
Crazy stuff. So Robbie's coming in not so much holding them hostage, but he's actually almost as the rescuer of those who held them hostage. Pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, he said so many of them said, thank you. Yeah. Thank you for calling us. We've been waiting for this.
Absolutely. Of course, folks, it's concerning to wonder if this stuff is merely getting rebranded using softer language. Absolutely. We need to recognize things as they are. And I also think there's a personal stewardship principle here at play, which is having a pure heart. We've been talking about that a lot on the show, actually, but I'd like to close our show with Matthew 23, 27 to 28, where Jesus pronounces a woe on the Pharisees. He says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but inside full of dead men's bones and all uncleanliness. Even so, you also appear righteous to men outwardly, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness." This is DEI. This is it. This is an empty promise of righteousness without any actual real righteousness inside. It's outward displays, virtue signaling, but no heart change, no holiness. Folks, we need to avoid this stuff. We need to stand against this stuff. Let us never be about merely signaling to others how good we appear to be. Let's strive for true goodness. True goodness comes only in Christ. It only comes in submission to Christ. It only comes when we willingly follow him, when we accept the gift of salvation that he has given to us. It's Christ's righteousness applied to us. That's true goodness. None of us on our own is truly good, actually. In fact, we are wretched sinners to our core. It is Christ's goodness in us that actually makes us truly good. Cling to Christ, folks. Cling to his goodness and live for him and have a pure heart. I think that's a good lesson for us as we close our show here. Great to be here with you all, folks. Lord willing, we'll do it again tomorrow. Until then, remember, everything you have belongs to the Lord. Let's be found good and faithful stewards with it all. God bless you all. We'll see you next time for more financial issues.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us.